You ever have one of those moments where you realize the people running your neighborhood think they're the FBI of suburban lawns? Yeah, that's exactly what happened to me last Halloween. I live in this small cul-de-sac in a quiet town outside of Denver. One of those picture-perfect neighborhoods with trimmed hedges, matching mailboxes and rules for just about everything, right down to the color of your garbage cans. And of course, we've got our own HOA president, a woman named Linda Carver, who treats her little clipboard like it's the Constitution. Now, I've always loved Halloween. My wife and I, well, we go all in. Cobwebs on the porch, fog machines, a few motion sensor skeletons that yell at you when you walk by. Nothing crazy, nothing dangerous, just fun. The neighborhood kids love it, and honestly, I kinda see it as tradition. My dad used to do the same thing when I was a kid. We didn't have much money, but come October 31st, the whole block came alive. So I guess I was just trying to pass that along to my kids too. Anyway, last year the weather was perfect. Crisp air, golden leaves on the ground, and this gentle wind that made the decorations sway just right. We set out 2 folding tables on the driveway, filled them with big bowls of candy, and let the music play softly. Classic Halloween tunes, Monster Mash, Thriller, that kind of stuff. By 7 o'clock, the street was packed with kids in costumes, princesses, pirates, little Spider-Men running in packs. The laughter was contagious. For a second, it actually felt like the kind of neighborhood you read about in those heartwarming magazine stories. Then, just as I'm handing out candy to a group of kids dressed like the Ghostbusters, I see her, Linda, marching down the sidewalk in her pressed slacks, hair pulled tight, clipboard in hand like a sheriff's badge. She's flanked by her husband, Tom, who's basically her silent muscle, always a step behind with his hands in his pockets like he's the moral support she never asked for. She stops right at the edge of my driveway, doesn't even say hi, just stares at the crowd. You realize this is against HOA policy, right? She says, pointing at my decorations like they're contraband. I blinked. Against policy to what? Hand out candy? She sighs, flipping through her papers. You've created an unauthorized public event. There's noise, traffic congestion, and people from outside the community entering private property. I laugh a little, thinking she's joking. Linda, it's Halloween. This is literally what happens every year. Not in this community, she says flatly. We've had complaints. Now I know complaints means she looked out her window and saw people having more fun than she was. But I didn't want to start a scene, so I said, all right, I'll keep it down. We'll wrap it up soon, but no. She took out her phone, snapped a few photos, and said, expect a notice from the board. Then she walked off, heels clicking like a metronome of misery. I thought she was bluffing. Turns out she wasn't. The next morning, I get a bright orange envelope taped to my front door. Notice of HOA fine, $500,000 for unauthorized distribution and event disturbance. There was even a time-stamped picture of me smiling with a candy bowl, like I was some kind of criminal mastermind. My wife, Rachel, thought it was hilarious at first, until she saw the fine amount. The kids overheard and got worried. My daughter Ellie asked, are we in trouble, Dad? Did we do something bad? That one hurt. I told her, no, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups just forget what it's like to be a kid. But inside, I was boiling. I could have just paid the fine, grumbled a bit, and moved on. But something in me snapped. Maybe it was the principle. Maybe it was just pride, but I thought, if they want to make an example out of me for spreading a little joy, then fine. I'll give them something worth writing a report about. So that night, while Rachel was putting the kids to bed, I sat down with my laptop and started typing. I wrote to a few local businesses, told them I wanted to organize a charity candy drive for kids in need. I explained what happened with the HOA, and honestly, people loved the story. By the next morning, my inbox was full. Local grocery stores offered to donate candy. A printing company volunteered to make custom Halloween bags, and a community outreach group said they'd help distribute them. One guy even messaged me saying, hey, I work for Channel 9 News, mind if we cover this? It was perfect. I called up my old friend Rick, who's now a lieutenant at the county sheriff's office, and asked, hey, any chance you can send someone to keep traffic moving if I, hypothetically, hosted another candy event? Rick laughed for a full 30 seconds before saying, you're serious, aren't you? Then he said, "Fine, I'll get you a permit, make it official." The next few days were chaos in the best way. We spent every evening stuffing little paper bags with candy and a tiny card that said, "Kindness is free. Share it." I had volunteers from 3 neighborhoods over helping out. Even the teenagers who usually egg houses on Halloween showed up to lend a hand. My garage looked like Willy Wonka's warehouse. By the time Halloween night rolled around again, 2 days later, we were ready. 2,000 candy bags lined up in rows. My front yard was lit up with orange lanterns and fairy lights. There was a big banner across the fence that said, "Trick or treat for all," sponsored by house number 43. Rachel had baked cookies for the volunteers, and the kids were bouncing with excitement. Around 6:30, cars started lining the street. Not just from our neighborhood, but from nearby communities too. I guess word spread faster than I expected. Parents were thanking us, kids were squealing, and my driveway looked like a festival. I felt this overwhelming sense of joy, like the whole neighborhood had come alive again, the way it was supposed to be. Then, right on cue, Linda appeared. She was wearing her HOA board windbreaker like she was about to lead a protest. Her face was red, part anger, part disbelief. She shouted over the crowd, "You're in direct violation of your fine. This is harassment of the HOA and disorderly conduct." I waved cheerfully. "Evening, Linda. Want a candy bag?" She didn't find it funny. "I'm calling security," she barked. That's when Rick, my friend from the sheriff's office, stepped up beside me, uniform and all, holding a clipboard of his own. He looked at her with this calm smile and said, "Ma'am, this event is fully permitted and approved by the town council. Everything's in order." She blinked, speechless for once. Then she tried to pivot. "Well, there's still noise in the traffic, which my department is handling," Rick cut in. "You can file a complaint if you like, but I'd suggest just enjoying the evening." For a brief second, I swear I saw her jaw tremble. Not with fear, just the realization that she'd lost control. She turned around, muttering something about unbelievable behavior, and stomped off. Meanwhile, the candy kept flowing. A news van pulled up. A reporter stuck a microphone in my face asking why I'd done all this. I just said, "Because no one should be fined for making kids smile." That clip made it on the evening broadcast. And suddenly, my little revenge act turned into this feel-good community story. By the time we handed out the last bag, it was past 10. The street was glowing with lanterns, laughter echoing off the houses. Even the grumpiest neighbors came out to see what the fuss was about, and ended up smiling, waving, chatting like old friends. When we finally shut off the lights, I stood on my porch for a long moment, just watching the empty street. For once it felt peaceful. But peace doesn't last long when an HOA president's pride is wounded. The next morning, there was another envelope taped to my door. I didn't even have to open it to know who it was from. Inside, she'd written, "Failure to comply with HOA regulations may result in further action." I laughed, loudly. My wife just shook her head and said, "You're enjoying this too much." Maybe I was. But you know what? For once, the whole street was talking. Not about the HOA's latest rule, but about how great it felt to come together again. Even families who'd never spoken before were planning barbecues, block parties, movie nights. And Linda? She wasn't invited. But that's not where the story ends. Because 2 days later, I got a letter, not from her, but from the city council. They wanted to recognize me for community engagement. And suddenly, Linda's little fine turned into a massive backfire that she couldn't control. When I opened that letter from the city, I actually laughed out loud. It was so poetic I almost couldn't believe it. They thanked me for promoting neighborhood unity and charitable giving. There was even an invitation to attend a community appreciation event where they'd present a small plaque. My wife framed that letter immediately. She said, "You're officially the most annoying neighbor in Linda's nightmares." A few days later, things started to shift in the strangest way. People who used to keep their heads down when the HOA board walked by now stopped to chat with me at the mailbox. One guy, James, from 2 streets over, told me he'd been fined for having a flagpole that was too tall by 3 inches. Another neighbor, Maria, said they made her repaint her fence because the color wasn't on the approved palette. even though it was literally beige. It hit me that all of us had just been quietly putting up with it for years. That weekend, a few of us got together for a cookout in my backyard. Nothing fancy, just burgers, beer, and good company. We laughed about the Halloween fiasco, traded our HOA horror stories, and by the end of the night, someone joked, we should start our own HOA. We all laughed. But there was a spark in that idea. Not a literal HOA, but a community committee. Something positive. Something we could actually control. A few of the older residents offered to draft letters to the township. Turns out the HOA's charter was up for renewal that spring. For the first time, people realized they had a say. Meanwhile, Linda was furious. She started walking around with a little camcorder, filming driveways and lawns, muttering about violations. I'd see her car parked by my house sometimes, just idling. I waved every time. Once I even brought her a cup of coffee and said, "You're out here so much, might as well make yourself comfortable." She drove off without saying a word. Then the news article came out. Local man turns HOA fine into town-wide charity. It had photos of the candy event, smiling kids, volunteers, even a few officers helping out. My phone didn't stop buzzing. Old friends from college texted me saying they saw me on TV. My boss forwarded it with the caption, "So this is why you took a personal day?" That kind of attention wasn't what I wanted, but it did something important. It made the HOA board look ridiculous. People started questioning where their dues were really going. Why were we paying thousands every year just to be policed by a few power-hungry neighbors? Within 2 weeks, a petition started circulating. I didn't start it, but I didn't stop it either. When the next HOA meeting came around, the turnout was massive. Usually maybe 10 people show up, mostly retirees. This time, at least 60 residents packed the clubhouse. Linda stood at the front, still clinging to her clipboard, trying to open the meeting with her usual housekeeping updates. But people weren't having it. One by one, folks started speaking up. James stood up first. "Linda, last year you fined me $500 for painting my shed. Do you want to explain how that was justified?" Maria chimed in right after. "And you fined me for my fence, but 3 houses down has the exact same color. What's the deal?" The room got louder. People were frustrated, years of resentment spilling out all at once. I didn't even have to say anything at first. It was like the dam had broken. Linda tried to regain control, raising her voice, saying, "If you have concerns, please file formal complaints through the HOA portal." Someone yelled, "We tried that." "You never respond." Finally, someone motioned for me to speak. Stood up not to yell or gloat, but to just tell the truth. "Look," I said, "I'm not here to fight anyone. I'm not anti-HOA. I get that rules matter. But when rules start killing the sense of community they were meant to protect, then what's the point?" Last week, 2,000 people came together because they wanted to feel connected again. No politics, no rules, just joy. That's what this neighborhood used to be about. The room went silent for a second, and then people started nodding. Even a few board members looked uncomfortable. Linda's jaw was tight. She said something about unauthorized speech, but at that point it didn't matter. A motion was filed right there to hold a vote of no confidence in the current HOA leadership. It passed, unanimously. That night, as I walked home under the streetlights, I thought about how crazy it all was. All of this because of some Halloween candy. But deep down, it wasn't just about that. It was about being tired of people sucking the fun out of everything, turning neighborhoods into rule books instead of families. The next month, the HOA board officially stepped down. A new committee was formed, made up of people who actually lived like human beings. Their first act? Removing holiday decoration restrictions from the bylaws. When that memo hit my inbox, I swear I framed it. Halloween rolled around again this year. I didn't plan anything wild this time. No permits, no media attention. Just the same folding tables, a few pumpkins, and a sign that read, "Candy's free, smiles too." Neighbors stopped by, not just for candy, but to talk, laugh, share stories. There were toddlers dressed as firefighters, teenagers blasting music, even a few adults with wine cups sneaking through the crowd. And you know what? It was perfect. Halfway through the night, I noticed a familiar figure standing near the curb. Linda. Not in her usual ironed blazer, but in a simple sweater, holding a small basket. She looked different, tired but softer. She hesitated, then walked up. "I brought some treats," she said quietly. "For the kids." For a second, I didn't know what to say. But then I smiled, nodded, and said, "Table's over there. We could use the help." She smiled, awkwardly but genuinely, and joined the line of volunteers. I don't think we'll ever be friends, but in that moment, it felt like something small but real had healed. Maybe that's all you can ask for. Later that night, after everyone left and the street was calm again, I sat on the porch with a mug of cider, looking at the empty candy wrappers blowing in the wind. My son Caleb curled up next to me and said, "Dad, that was the best Halloween ever." And I thought, yeah, it really was. I realized something then. Sometimes the smallest acts of rebellion aren't about breaking rules. They're about reminding people that kindness still matters more than control. That you don't have to fight hate with hate. Sometimes you can just drown it in a sea of good candy and laughter. So yeah, maybe I did get fined for handing out candy once. But I also got to see a neighborhood come back to life because of it. Worth every penny. What about you? Have you ever had someone try to ruin something simple and good, just because they could? What did you do? Did you fight back, or did you find another way around it? Tell me in the comments. I'm curious how you'd handle your own HOA, Linda. And hey, if you're ever in Denver next Halloween, stop by House Nar 43. We'll save you a candy bag.